And she is a peer support worker with the Penticton Community Health Service Center. I believe she used to be with the Kelowna team. And I'd like to welcome her here today. She's going to be talking a little bit about the role, her role of a peer support worker in interior health out clinics. I think it might be helpful for some of the feedback that we've heard is that, you know that there's these resources out there to get peers involved, but some more, you'd like to know some more details on what that role exactly entails. And hopefully Brittany can talk a little bit about that. So welcome, Brittany, and I will pass the virtual mic over to you if you're ready.
Hi. Okay, so as you know, my name is Brittany. I'm not the most comfortable with like public speaking, so just bear with me on that as well. Yeah, I don't have a huge presentation planned. I'm just going to kind of speak from the heart a little bit about like my background, how I became a peer support worker, and just kind of like what that all looks like now. So basically, in 2010, I was in a really bad car accident. I was left with a broken back. I broke my L5 vertebrae, which is the very last vertebrae in your spine. It was a compression fracture. I was in the hospital for 3 weeks and then in a back brace for 5 months. Once I got out of my back brace, I was pretty weak and had to do like constant chiropractor appointments and physio and IMS treatments and massage, just like tons of physio and rehabilitation to try to like gain some mobility back, some strength back, try to manage the pain, everything. At that time, I started helping one of my friend's moms at her in-home daycare and started working with kids. It was a way I could kind of keep hands off while continuing to work. I actually loved it so much that I ended up working with kids for like 12 years afterwards as well. Obviously, working with young kids, though, was again very difficult on my back and caused me a lot of pain and a lot of issues, carrying kids around all the time, trying to run around, play on the ground with them, all the like goofy little things that kids do. So I went and talked to my doctor because I was having a hard time managing these millions of appointments and working with kids. And at the time, my doctor prescribed me opiates. He prescribed me Oxycontin. So initially, this was like my miracle. I was like, finally, something works. I can still run around and be silly with the kids and have fun and not be in like crying pain at the end of every day. But very quickly, as we know, like this story changed and everything went from this is the best pill ever to like this is a total nightmare. I would start waking up in the middle of the nights with restless legs and a lot of like difficulty sleeping through the night as my tolerance was growing and building. I was never really kind of at the time described the difference between like something that's addicting and something that's dependency forming. So I just figured, oh, addicting, whatever, like I don't smoke cigarettes. I don't have an addictive personality. I'll be fine. I can quit if I want to. I didn't really understand the difference between dependency forming. So I continued to take the medication and just slowly upped my tolerance. One day I had to go without my medication. And that's when I realized that I was experiencing really severe withdrawals at that point already. This like really freaked me out. So I tried to hide what I was going through and tried to deal with it on my own. I tried to slowly taper down. I would like write in my book, okay, today I'm going to take this much, the next day I'm going to take this much, and constantly make these little schedules for myself to help myself get off. That never worked, never ended up being able to follow through with anything. And I continued to hide this problem and it continued to get worse and worse and worse. Down the line, I went to the Oak Clinic and I got on Suboxone prescription. This worked out really well for me for a little while. And as everybody knows, with addiction and substance use or any kind of life change, honestly, even like a new diet or anything, we don't always do it perfectly. We have slips and little ups and downs. So I had my own ups and downs and with my substance use. There was a lot of mental stuff as well as like a mental, emotional, and physical trauma that I was dealing with from my accident that I was using the medication to mask, which I didn't really understand at the time. So yeah, eventually my substance use grew from using Oxy to using the street supply, the toxic street supply, and I was using fentanyl. I was using fentanyl for just a short period in comparison to some people, of 4 years. And in this short 4 years, I lost everything. I lost my house, I lost my jobs, countless friends, countless trust. I became a hermit. I was trapped in my own life. I was on this like constant 4-hour time clock of when I would be getting sick again. So I just I did not have the capacity to do anything beyond using at this time. I was living on the coast at that point and ended up moving back to Kelowna to be with my family and find some support, try to like talk to them about what I was going through. I couldn't really hide it anymore. Everything was falling apart. So I came back to Kelowna and moved back in with my dad for a little while. But he quickly was unable to trust me as well and couldn't understand what I was going through and kicked me out. I lived in my car then for 4 months, and winter was coming. It was cold. I was just having a horrible time. So I ended up going to the Kelowna hospital and explaining to them what I was going through and that I needed some support. Otherwise, I just didn't want to be here anymore. And they set me up with a cab ride over to AG, which is a shelter in Kelowna that it's for women. I stayed at the shelter for 3 months, continuing to try to work on my relationship with my family. And then they actually helped me go to treatment in Toronto. So I flew to Toronto and I went to treatment over there. I was there for about 3 months. It was really great. It was all very outdoorsy, not very clinical. And I was able to like talk about my struggles and like realize what I was masking and the reasons why I was using. I realized it was so much deeper than just the dependency and the tolerance that I had built to the substance. There was so much emotional trauma, so much mental pain that I was also masking. And that's why, even though I had periods of abstaining from opiates, I kept going back and kept falling back into old patterns. So working with psychologists and psychiatrists and even sleep specialists there, I was able to kind of like self-diagnose what was going on with me mentally and emotionally and work on that from a better angle. When I got out of treatment, my mom, who was also struggling with her own dependency, she was an alcoholic. She passed away from her alcoholism. She went in and out of the hospitals constantly with her addiction and kind of became the boy who cried wolf to them, unfortunately. And they dismissed her as another addict and often would put her in a room and just kind of ignore her or give her Ativan and send her on her way. The same sort of event happened. She went to the hospital with some chest pain and difficulty breathing. They gave her Ativan. An hour later, they went to check on her and send her home, and she had gone into cardiac arrest. She went straight into a deep coma and passed away. This was really difficult for me, obviously. I had a relapse again at this point, and quickly after, I was like, what am I doing? Like, I need to beat this for both of us. She wasn't able to get another chance. I need to beat this for both of us. So I took my Suboxone basically the next morning and went straight into precipitated withdrawal, which was like withdrawals times 100. It was pure hell. It felt like I was burning alive, dying. The way that I explain it to most people is basically like Exorcist. Like I was writhing, crying, screaming, like it was just absolute hell. At this time, I was prescribed Cadian because it's an opiate, and I was able to start on that right away. I'm now 2.5, actually, I'm just 4 months short of 3 years into my recovery of opiates as well as other substances. I don't use anything at this time. I've been working with Interior Health for just a little over 2 years now as well. I did start my peer support work at the Kelowna Oak Clinic. That's also where I started my recovery. So it kind of brought things full circle for me, which was really great. The doctors there and prescribers there were super supportive for me. They were never stigmatizing. They never judged me, no matter how many times I slipped and fell. They kept prescribing and kept supporting me and like addressing whatever I needed and whatever was going on with me. Once that trust kind of grew there and I developed some relationships there, I started working alongside Allison Kite to start training with mental health and substance use. I did like her 6-week training and got certified. And then I started working in the Kelowna Oak Clinic. I did tons of all their I-learns and trainings and all that fun stuff as well. And then I worked in the Kelowna Oat Clinic for about a year. Basically, what I was doing in the Kelowna Oat Clinic was connecting with clients there who were going through similar things that I had been through, coming in with withdrawal, coming in not really knowing why they're using, knowing that they want to get off, but not sure what the next steps are. Just kind of talking to them about my background, what I had been through, and just giving the clinic overall like a little bit more of a familiar face and like a little less clinical, just kind of breaking the ice and helping to break some stigmas around substance use. At first I was really anxious starting this role. I didn't really understand like, how am I going to be able to talk to a total stranger about something so private that like I hid from even the closest people to me, right? But I was pretty surprised with just how quickly sharing my own experiences, other people opened up and did the same thing in return. I think the nice thing about what I've been through is the vulnerability that I'm able to share with other people is often quickly reciprocated. I think that in talking to clinicians and other supporting staff, I realized just how much this role also helps other people see things through a different lens. Sometimes what's common sense to me, just because of my past experiences, I realize isn't common sense to other people just by the way that they're listening in on what I'm talking about. So I just wanted to share a little bit now that I've kind of talked about how I got into being a peer support worker and the start of my journey, just kind of why I find the role important as well. Obviously, like I said, I think people are able to open up right away and it breaks that stigma down and breaks those walls down. But I think a huge part of why this role is so successful as well is just empathy. Obviously, a lot of our clinicians and supporting staff are also very empathetic and are able to put themselves in other people's shoes and see their struggle and not want other people to feel that way. But I think the important part of the peer support working role is that they've literally walked in other people's shoes. They've literally been in that same seat. They've literally seen the same prescribers, access to the same resources, and just been through the same steps, maybe different, but similar as other people are going through. So it just makes it so much easier for other people to talk about that as well. I'm just going to go over kind of some of the tips that I like to give my clients when I talk to them about some things that have worked for myself. So these are kind of like my little tips and tricks to like just getting back to your authentic self. These are things that have worked for me. Obviously, everybody's different and everybody's journey is a little different, but the number one thing that I like to start with is NA or a recovery work booklet or any kind of background work as to looking at like why you're using, what it is that you're getting from substance use. Is there a healthier way that we can get the same sort of thing that we're getting out of substance use? Creating a support group from like friends, family, anybody that you feel like you can talk to, that you feel like isn't going to judge you, that will understand you. Getting your personal health back on track. So going back to the doctors, the dentists, whoever you need to be seeing to get your physical health back as well. Change, obviously, we know it's not one thing we need to change. It's absolutely everything we need to change, which is so difficult, but you need to change often the people you're hanging out with, the places that you're going to, and the things that you're doing. On that same kind of note, routine and structure was very important for me in the beginning. I honestly didn't even know what to do with so many free hours in the day because my mind was so constantly on this loop of like getting money, meeting the dealer, using, getting money, meeting the dealer, using, like 24 hours a day, stuck in that loop. So when I stopped using, I was like, what do I do? There's so many free hours of the day. Like, what do normal people do? So just kind of building a little bit of a routine, like get up, make my bed, have a shower, have breakfast, go to a meeting, hang out with friends and family, go for a hike, do some of my work on myself through the work booklets and stuff, and then go to bed. And it was just kind of copy paste for the first little while until I could kind of like build a routine where my brain wasn't obsessing over the use constantly. Then after that, I tried to slowly add in new hobbies and new interests, like things that I wanted to try, making bucket lists, like maybe going bowling, going swimming, any like dumb little fun things that I used to do as a kid that I stopped learning how to have fun once I was using opiates. Finding fulfilling employment for me was working in the Oak Clinic, and now working here in interior health with the youth ICM team. Paying it forward or paying it back, whatever way you want to look at it, is really, really fulfilling and also helpful for me in my own recovery. Seeing other people struggle and being able to help them or make a difference, or even just give them somebody that they can talk to that isn't going to judge them, is really fulfilling and helps me to kind of stabilize my own recovery as well. And then the main ones were knowing why you're using. So for myself, I kind of figured out that I was using because of physical pain, but also because of a lot of emotional trauma. So these are things in my recovery that I try to continue to work on. Otherwise, you're basically white knuckling your recovery, and you're going to still be wanting to use because you haven't looked at the root cause to why you're using, and you're still going to want to be using. So for example, for myself, like I try to go to chiro again and all those appointments that I was previously talking about, as well as meeting with a counselor to work on my emotional and mental health. If I can keep all those things in balance, then I find that I don't need the substances to level me out or to balance. I think the root of a lot of substance use is most people, if they could be doing better or could be feeling better, they're going to choose to. They're not going to choose to struggle. They're not going to choose to be stuck in a cycle where you're obsessing like that. So a lot of people initially, we do get something from substance use. We get something out of our use. So we need to figure out what that is that we're getting from it and try to find healthier ways to get that same relief or that same balance or that same whatever it is that you're getting from it. Another big part that I like to talk about in recovery is stigmatizing language. This is something that we're all kind of working on right now as well. Initially, why this is very important to me, initially in my own addiction and recovery, I had a very, very hard time labeling myself as an addict. I didn't think that I took my oxys inappropriately. I didn't think that I was abusing them. I didn't think I was doing anything that wasn't prescribed for me, yet I still built a dependence. I still built a tolerance, and ultimately still started abusing them. So any kind of like stigmatizing language can really stop people from accessing supports and accessing help. I have a booklet here that I wasn't able to put into slides, so I'll just post it into the chat there, and everybody can kind of look at it on their own time. But it gives you some nice little examples of ways that we say things, and then the different ways that we can say things. For example, one that I'm trying to work on right now with clients is, rather than saying, "Oh, I'm so proud of you," I try to tell them, "Oh, you must be so proud of yourself," because this shows them that this is still something that you should be proud of, this accomplishment you're doing. But it also doesn't tell them that if this behavior were to change, I wouldn't be proud of you anymore, so that they know our relationship isn't contingent on them doing well. If they have slips and falls, I'm still here for them to talk to. The last thing that I'd like to kind of touch on before we open it up is a wellness recovery action plan. This is very important also. I took the wellness recovery action planning like program thing, but the main kind of things I'd like to share about it are like having those safe people that you can talk to and share things about. For myself, red flags and green flags are an important one. So basically what I mean by red flags and green flags are, I would write down 5 things that I'm doing well when I'm doing well. So for example, I'm making my bed, I'm eating properly, I'm hanging out with my friends and family, I'm going to the gym, anything kind of like along those lines. And then what are my red flags when I start slipping? Because often we start relapsing in our behaviors and our mannerisms long before we pick up. And by the time we want to pick up, we're not going to tell somebody or reach out because we don't want them to change our minds. Our mind's already made up. So sometimes for the red flags, these little slips and stuff can look like, you know, you've started isolating again. Your room is like a complete mess when it's not normally like that. Or your hygiene is slipping. You're really flaky on plans. Just any little things that can be your little red flags or green flags are helpful to know. It's also helpful to tell these red flags or green flags to somebody that you trust, somebody that can see these little red flags happening and saying, "Hey, I kind of noticed you're isolating again. Like, is everything okay?" Somebody who you can trust to check in on you. Yeah, that's kind of all I have to say about the red flags and green flags. I don't really know if there's anything else that you'd like me to share about or ask about, but if there's anything that anybody wants to ask or has questions about, then I'd be happy to answer that as well.
Thanks so much, Brittany. I know you mentioned at the beginning that you're not big on public speaking, but you would
Yeah.
that because you were awesome. So I just wanted to tell you that. Yeah, if you don't mind, we can open it up to questions from the group. If anyone has any questions for Brittany.
Yeah, I agree with what's in the chat, just so well articulated.
It's
and
Tammy. Can you hear me?
Oh.
Yeah, I hear you.
Tammy? Always right. Nice to see you. I know I personally, and I think I speak for the whole clinic, really miss having your peer presence in our clinic and that support for the clients. So you haven't been replaced yet. I hope we find someone that you won't be replaced, but I hope we find someone else to fill the role as well. I'm wondering, now that you've been in a couple peer support positions, what are maybe some of the gaps that you see where you could think a peer would be where would be a good place to place peers? I mean, everywhere, but specifically.
So off the top of my head, I can think of a few. For myself, now being so privileged, obviously, like I have a cell phone, I have a vehicle, I have a bed to sleep in at night, and I'm still weaning down from my Canadian, I still run into like stigma. I still run into like a lot of issues over the holidays. For example, my Plan G ran out and nobody was notified. No, nobody was told. I have no idea why it happens like that. But both times that it's run out in my 3 years almost now of recovery, nobody's notified. Nobody has said anything until I get to the pharmacy. Well, the last time that I got to the pharmacy, like I said, we were just rounding into Christmas. I just spoke to my new prescriber the day before, and she was off for holidays. Like that's very, very frustrating for me. Like I said, I have a phone and I'm able to call around and try to like get the pharmacy to send off the new like referral or get talk to the doctor and try to get a new prescription faxed over. But for people who don't, that's a huge barrier. Like if your choices are between having to pay for your oat medication, which are extremely expensive, especially Canadian, or meeting the dealer who's probably going to give it to you for free or cuff you, like a lot of people are going to relapse in that instance. They're not going to sit there and feel sick over the entire holidays and go through that, which is even more dangerous and even more scary because they have zero tolerance at that point. And even in this past couple of years, we've seen such a change in the drugs that are on the streets. Fentanyl isn't even just fentanyl anymore, right? So there's so many other things that are in there. So that's one place where I see a lot of barriers and a lot of issues still. Another area where like I would personally love to have my own peer support worker is coming off of oat medication. I still find that like very difficult. I still find that like even Googling it and trying to like figure it all out and working with my doctor, it's very hard to figure out the balance and working like that down. And when I do it a tiny bit off or a tiny bit wrong, I'm missing work because I get sick again still. So I've cut down from like 1,300 milligrams down to 250. I'm very low now, but getting off that last little bit is just extremely difficult still. So I'd like to see more supports around that area. Like I said, being able to talk to other peer support workers who have previously kind of gone where you're going and like have been through the same things is great, but I feel sometimes like the guinea pig still. And like, I don't have a peer support worker who has weaned off of these medications already. I'm like, can this successfully be done? Has somebody successfully done this? Should I switch to another medication? Like what should I do here? So that'd be nice.
Thanks.
I see Kelsey, you have your hand raised there.
Yeah, thank you, Brittany. I just wanted to know if you would be able to share with the group maybe some of the feedback that you've received from the folks that you've been supporting around what they have found to be most helpful from your role.
Oh, I get a lot of really good feedback. I guess some of the like common feedback that I get is just having somebody to talk to who's like been there. I know even for myself, when I went to treatment in Toronto, I had like an interventionist or whatever she was called, and she wasn't an addict. She had no prior substance use. And I remember like just having this stubborn arrogance to myself, thinking like, why the hell would I talk to you? You don't know like what I'm going through. You don't know what this feels like, or like why I don't just stop, you know? Like I didn't feel like I could trust her. And I know that's not the case. I know like to do the role that she was doing, she was obviously like extremely compassionate and like interested in it as well. But I just felt that way. And I know like a lot of my clients tell me how grateful they are to have somebody who's been through it, or somebody that they can just ask like the weird questions to as well, you know, like when did your using dreams stop? Do you still like have stomach issues from the oat medication? What do you do when you have triggers? Like just little weird things that you don't really talk to the doctor about, right? So I get a lot of good feedback around that as well.
That's great. Yeah. So it sounds like just the fact that you had that lived experience, it doesn't really matter where or how that support's being provided. It's just that familiarity with the experience.
Yeah, I wouldn't wish it on anybody, that's for sure, but I definitely am grateful now for my lived experience. I do feel it makes it easier for me to approach people on the subject. I feel like it makes it easier for other people to approach me on the subject. And I just naturally have a very empathetic lens about it, when I previously didn't either. Like with my own mom's alcohol use as well. I was like, why is she doing this? Why won't she just stop? Why is she pissing us all off and stressing us all out, ruining the family, you know? And then when I went through my own opiate use disorder, I realized like opiate use disorder and alcohol use disorder have very similar withdrawals. And I was much more compassionate and much more understanding. So having this lens and working in this role just makes me a lot more empathetic. When I see people on the streets, I think, God, that just must be so hard, because when I was going through withdrawals in a comfortable place, I was still just dying. So I can't imagine going through withdrawals on the street or somewhere that's not unsafe because people might rob you, or unsafe because you're just cold and could freeze at night. Like, yeah, I wouldn't wish it on anybody, like I said, but I'm grateful for it in this role now.
Thank you.
Mhm.
I see a comment in the chat from Cole, just about lots of things. You said a lot of interesting things today, but one of them, the green and red flags could be incorporated into potentially, you know, an action planning visit or something like that. So
Mhm. We just added it into the youth day program, actually. So
awesome.
mhm.
Any other questions for Brittany?
I'd just say, I think you should keep it up with the public speaking.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. Yeah. Thank you so much, Brittany, for joining today. And yeah, we will be in touch. And if any other resources that you talked about today or anything to do with what you talked about, if you want us to share with this group afterwards, then just let me know. But yeah, we appreciate you taking the time to share a bit of your story and about the peer support worker role.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much.